All right, here we are. We are at guest number 2 today. Yes, that is right. Guest number 2. Welcome to the second day of the Campfire Stories convention, where we're talking with a bunch of really cool people from all different types of disciplines. We have Trevor here today, and if you guys want to have questions for him, you can go into the Discord. The link is in the description of the video. Go there and drop your questions in. We'll try to jam him in at the end. If we don't talk over, which has happened every single time. So we'll try to remember. Trevor Devall is, we got to meet, I think around 2019 when we were working on Hive Busters and
right, for Gears 5.
For Gears 5. And that was a wild time, which we can talk about a little bit, because it's kind of the reason I went to Stockholm, but we'll get around to it. Trevor is an amazing storyteller, and he has his own channel, Me, Myself, and Die. But why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Sure. Well, I'm Trevor Devall. I'm a professional voice actor. I've been voicing cartoons and video games for 25 years. I'm Dookie on Johnny Test. I'm Emperor Palpatine on all the Lego Star Wars stuff. I'm Rocket Raccoon on Guardians of the Galaxy, and a bunch of characters on My Little Pony.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've got something like 300 credits or 250
Wow.
credits or something listed. So I've been at it a while, but my true passion, which I finally revealed to the world in 2019, was gaming, and not video gaming, but role playing. Because I've been playing like basically D&D and its derivatives since I was, I don't know, 6-7 years old back in '79. So I've been at it a long time, and I never talked about it in public because when I was growing up in the '80s, you didn't talk about that.
No.
That was not cool back then. So if you ever wanted to kiss a girl, you did not tell them that you played role-playing games.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a very different world today. But,
Yeah.
So I started the channel Me, Myself, and Die in 2019, which was me solo role-playing, which is just me playing a game by myself and playing all the characters and taking the role of GM and player and improvising the events based on the outcome of the die rolls. And it took off, and I've been in it 4 years, and we're past 30,000 subscribers now, and onwards and upwards. So it's been great.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see it, and even it's funny because I've watched the show with my daughter, and because you're doing all the characters, she's a bit of an actor herself, so she loves watching what you're doing, and so I think it has this wide appeal that maybe people wouldn't expect because you're just, at the end of the day, you're just telling stories.
Basically, basically through the structure of the game. And it's funny because I have a very strong opinion on that word story as it relates to role-playing games, and I know that the whole purpose of this whole convention is the importance of story.
Right.
But ironically, I feel that pursuing a story for story's sake in a role-playing game is not the best way to utilize the role-playing game. Story is something in a role-playing game that's far best served if it emerges out of the gameplay rather than if it's imposed on the gameplay. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. In fact, let's get into that because that is, we were talking a little bit before about that. I've really changed the way I've run games after watching your show about it becoming more conversational and letting the story emerge without, you come in with a bit of a character idea and then you write some notes that are tags that you can come up with later, but then you fill it all in as you're playing. And I find it's such a different way of doing it. And yeah, I definitely got inspired by you kind of playing all your characters and doing all your own stories. Where did the seed for that come from you? Like, did you, obviously when you were younger, you played the standard D&D games, but where did you start to have this new sense for, I think there's a different way to do it that's more interesting?
Wow. Well, there's a few moments that happened. I started out, I'm mostly a GM. I'm mostly a games master. I don't play as much as I GM. Frankly, I'm a much better GM than I am a player.
Same, man. Same.
But I've done that mostly over the years. So I suffered from storyitis. I suffered from one true wayism. I suffered from epic. I'm going to tell my players a story. I'm going to lead them through a pre-designed epic story, because most of us start that way.
Yeah.
Right? We think, but while I had great experiences in that, I also had terrible experiences in that. And the reason is because the way the game works, it's designed to facilitate player agency. The player characters have to feel like their choices that they make have an impact on the world.
Yeah.
If they don't have any impact, if their choices don't change the outcome of events, then they're just pawns in someone else's story.
Right.
And that's no bueno. You're being railroaded. You're being led by the nose down this predetermined path. And that's while the path can be great and interesting and everything, it's still not as it's still typically not as satisfying as something that you help create yourself as a player, as part of a team of players at the table, right?
Yeah.
So that at the end of the campaign you can say, oh man, if we hadn't done this, that thing would have never have happened.
Right.
And the GM, if he's being honest and has honestly allowed those storylines to emerge, he will be just as excited and surprised
Yeah.
by the outcome of the story. And that was the moment for me. The moment I realized I didn't want to know the end. Because, I had started off by running these great campaigns where it was, okay, and then this happens, and then and that's going to lead them to here. And then they're going to choose to do this because, of course, players always do what you expect them to do. And then this is going to wind up here. And at the end, there's going to be this massive set-piece battle where this is going to happen and these revelations will happen. And I realized this is probably in the mid-90s some point, maybe even later than that. I realized it was like a light bulb went on, and I went, I'm so bored with that. I'm so bored with knowing how it ends.
Yeah.
I don't want to know how it ends. I want them to tell me how it ends.
Yeah, totally.
So that was the moment.
Yeah, it's funny because I struggled with for a while, because I still do sometimes, I suppose, but I don't want my players to feel like, I think he's just making this shit up as he goes. But then as I've really gone into that, they actually like it. They're like, we're all in this together. We don't know what's over the horizon. Let's find out together. And that was a worry of mine, because you want to be like, I'm a writer. I'm going to tell them these grand stories. But it is true. The more you lean into it, the more, yeah.
I think that's absolutely true. But I think that both things are kind of true at once, because as a GM, you do want to have a super solid, in my opinion, of course, everybody's got their own version, but in my estimation, the goal of a GM is to know the world. To know the world and the NPCs and how they might react, and to be consistent in that, so that the players know that, maybe the specific details of the outcomes aren't predetermined, but I know if I go and talk to that NPC that we talked to 3 sessions ago, we know what his agenda is, we know what his personality is, we know what his triggers are. That's going to remain unless we actively try and change that.
Right.
So that kind of consistency, I still want to feel like I'm in the hands of someone who knows what's going on, just not someone who's telling me what to do. Yeah,
that's a great point. It's funny too, because the players are they right away will call out when you have created an inconsistency. Wasn't that character this last time? Like, I didn't write that one down. So let's go back a little bit. You're a fellow Canadian. You live in the States now, but you're from Edmonton, correct? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah.
What was that as a I would say you're a prairie kid. I mean, Edmonton's a city, but we're both prairie kids. I'm from Saskatchewan. So where did this all start for you as like a storyteller? Obviously more immersed into like acting and all this, but where did that really begin for you?
I think that my voice career started at the exact same time as my love of games did, because when I discovered D&D and I was run through the village of Hamlet as one player, I was the only player.
Nice.
And the GM was this guy named Jason Peters, lived down the street from me, and he introduced me to the AD&D Player's Handbook, and I made a paladin, called him Black Jay, because I didn't know what to call him, so we picked a name from the village of Hamlet, where I was playing, and I was instantly transported, like 7, 8 years old, whatever I was.
Wow.
I was instantly transported to this magical realm where, oh my God, there I was. And I was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. My sister used to read it to me when I was a kid. So I was well versed in that whole thing.
Yeah.
So fantasy was my jam. But I always had a penchant for doing voices. And even when I would play with like action figures, I would give them all little voices and I would differentiate the voices and stuff. So that just came naturally to me. I think I came out of the womb talking in different, voices. But it didn't occur to me to be a career until much, much, much later, because my flair for the dramatic brought me into the world of acting and eventually directing. And for a long time, I was a theater director, and then I was a filmmaker. And when I moved to Vancouver in '98, I fell backwards into the voice world because I didn't even know that was a job. I didn't know that providing voiceover was actually an opportunity. I mean, obviously, you think about it in hindsight, well, of course it is. The voices for the animated characters got to come from somewhere. But I didn't stop to consider that. Yeah. So I fell backwards into it, and then I was off the races for 25 years. But my love of gaming never changed, and it was always interchangeable. So my friends to this day will tell me that, they'll be watching a show, their kids will be watching a show or something, and they'll hear a voice, and they'll go, wait a minute, that was that town guard we had to bribe to get to the tower in that one adventure. You know what I mean? So they know all my tricks, right?
That's amazing.
And so they'll hear the voices I did in the game, and they'll go, "Oh, right, I remember that guy."
That's wonderful. That's so okay. So yeah, you fell into it. You lived in Vancouver. Why did you move to Vancouver? What was there? Like you were just theater directing. That was kind of the move.
I had started to make films in Edmonton, and there was no
Okay.
infrastructure and no opportunity. But in Vancouver, that was the crazy
Yeah.
busy time of Vancouver. That was the height of like that was in the days of the X-Files and
Yeah.
stuff when tons were going on. And I had a friend who was a location manager there, and I went to stay with him for 3 weeks just to check out the scene. And in that 3 weeks, I wound up getting an apartment and an agent, and it all just happened at once. And
Wow.
I moved in 98. I started working for my agent in the office actually within the first few months, which was the most invaluable experience an actor could have. Because when you as an actor see how the business works from the other side, oh, that gives you a big leg up because you see how it works, right? Most actors don't have that perspective. So that was a massive boon. And then in 2000, I auditioned for my first voice job, and I basically got it, and that was that. So I went to Vancouver to become a filmmaker, though. That was the thing. I was
Interesting.
going to continue making films, and I did. I made a film called The Plaids, which was a short film that aired on the Comedy Network and on
Wow.
the Space Station in Toronto and stuff. So that was cool. We won some awards for it and everything. That was cool. But then I fell into voice work, and I sort of never looked back. And I moved to LA in 2013, not out of any desire to do so, but because, again, there was this confluence of events. The stars aligned, and there was this opportunity where basically I got invited to go down. And
Yeah.
all my friends said to me, dude, nobody gets invited to go down. You have to take it. And I was
Yeah.
like, all right, I'll go down for a year, and I'll do a radio commercial, and I'll maybe do like a guest spot on a Disney princess show, and then I'll go home, and then I can say I lived in LA.
Right.
Big deal. Well, within 6 months I was on F is for Family, and I was on Guardians of the Galaxy, and it took off. So I was very fortunate to have those confluence of events. And then I was in LA for 8 years until the pandemic, when we said sayonara and moved out to Texas in 2021, and here I stay. Here I make my stand.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about it before. I mean, when you were looking at moving, was there any other? Did you ever think about going back to Canada, or
No.
were you just like, no way?
No.
Those days are
Not-
over.
Maybe one day we'll go back.
Yeah.
But right now it's hard to imagine it's hard to imagine the circumstances under which I would be lured back to my homeland, because
Yeah.
my homeland right now is not very appealing to me for numerous reasons.
Yeah, well, we could do that one off air because we went back this summer too. We're like, it's nice to see everybody, but
Yeah. But it's a pretty big but.
yeah. So you landed all those gigs at F is for Family, and you're living in LA. I mean, how did that all happen? Was it just doing auditions? Did you know people? Like,
No.
what-
No, how it happened, this is so dumb. But this story, no one has this story. It's too unbelievable. Basically, I was on Johnny Test playing Dookie, and the creator of Johnny Test, Scott Fellows, he also did a show called Big Time Rush, which was a Nickelodeon show that they did in Burbank, in LA. And they were doing a movie, the Big Time Rush movie, and he needed a villain. He needed a bad guy, because in the movie it was kind of like a James Bond spoof. The kids go to
Right.
England, and they run into this supervillain wearing a white suit, stroking a cat, the whole bit, and he wanted me to play that. And I said, Scott, I'm more of a face for radio type. I don't really do the on camera. And he said, oh my God, no, you'll be perfect. So he put me in this movie. It was the best experience ever. It was just magical. And
Nice.
after that, he said to me, oh my God, you were so funny in this thing. I got to introduce you to the executives down there. They're going to love you. I'm like, yeah, okay, Mr. Hollywood producer, you do that. I'll be holding my breath.
Yeah, totally.
A week later, I get an email from him saying, well, I got a meeting with the head of casting at Nickelodeon for you. Just go down and tell him I sent you. I was like, what? I
Wow.
said, I can't work in the States, right? He said, we'll figure it out. I'm like, okay. So I had no desire to go to the States. Zero. I had a great career in Vancouver. I
Yeah.
was doing fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was one of the top dogs in Vancouver, right? I was one of the voice guys, right? It was
Yeah.
fantastic. There was like 30 of us that did everything. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, well, I'll go down. I knew David Kay. He was an expat as well, who was down there doing very well. And I knew James Arnold Taylor, who's the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Clone Wars. But he was also Johnny on Johnny Test, so I knew him. But that was
okay.
it. I knew nobody else. So I went down just to check it out, and I had these meetings with casting directors and agents, and basically they all said, we'll help you get your green card. Just tell us what you need, and then come down and we'll put you to work. And I was like, I still
Wow.
didn't believe it. I was
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no.
Doesn't work like that.
It's too good to be true.
Yeah.
And even when I moved down, oh my God, man. Even when I moved down, I had signed with one agency, it was one of the big three but I didn't like them. I didn't like how they were doing things. So I had a meeting with Andrea Romano, who happens to be like one of the preeminent voice directors of all time. But I knew her from Tom and Jerry, and a friend of mine was good friends with her. So we said, oh, I'll set up a coffee. So she calls and says, hey, I'm just at the Warner Brothers lot. Do you want to come down and meet at the Starbucks? I said, yeah, sure. So like nothing, I go down to have coffee with Andrea Romano. And in the voice world, this is like saying, oh, you're just going to have a drink with Mel Blanc, right? It's no big deal. Just whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting with Andrea Romano, and she says to me, you're wasting your time with this agency. Here's the name of an agency that you should be with. They're going to love you. I'm going to call them and tell them that they should talk to you. I went, okay. Had no idea that this is not a thing that happens. I get a panicked phone call from this other agency, SBV, who I'm with now.
Yeah.
I've been with ever since. And they said, yeah, Trevor, we just got a call from Andrea Romano saying that we need to talk to you. Can you come in now? Can you come in right now and
Wow.
maybe sign with us? It was basically like that. I said, what? They said, that never happens. I said, okay. So I went in, I signed, and within about a month or so, I was working. So it was again, hugely fortuitous set of
Wow.
circumstances. So I drew the golden ticket. What can I tell you?
It's amazing, though. I mean, if when you look back when you were younger, I mean, you can never predict these things, I suppose. But like, was that something in your mind? Like, when I get old, I'm gonna move down to LA, and no, this is just totally out of left field.
Totally. And like I said, I was anti-LA. I was like,
Yeah.
to hell with LA. I don't want nothing to do with that garbage. Nah, LA is all this. LA is all that. I'd never been there, but I had all these
Ideas, yeah.
But I think probably the best part of the whole story is that a couple years in on Guardians, I had this idea for an episode, and I sat down with Harrison Wilcox, who was the head honcho of the show at the time in Marvel, and I said, I got this idea for this episode. And so I pitched him the idea, and he said, that's great. Do you want to write it? And I said, write it. No, I just want to watch it. You guys, you write. But he said, but you want to write? You should write this for us. And I'm like, what writing? It's a cartoon. What are you talking about? So he said, well, I'll tell you what. Let's get you to write this episode, but let's start you off first. Do you want to write an Avengers episode or a couple of Avengers episodes for us? I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Again, that's not how this is supposed to happen. You're supposed to be spending years and years and years of throwing scripts and knocking on doors. This, I just walked into a Thai restaurant with this guy and said, I got this idea about this episode. And there it was. I was next thing I know, I was a writer.
Did you do any writing before that, even just for yourself? Like, you did film. Were you directing, or were you writing as well?
I did. Yeah, both. I had done a couple of like fairly big shows. I did a very, very big show it ran for 4 years in Western Canada called the Back Kitchen Release Party, which was a play about this band from Newfoundland that has to gig their way across the country to go to a wake. So that did very, very well. I wrote that. I'd written the Plaids, that film I'd done before. So I was no stranger to writing, but at the same time, I wouldn't have called myself a professional writer by any stretch of the imagination. And so it was funny, when I sat down to write my first Avengers episode, I knew nothing about the Avengers. I didn't know who Black Panther was. I didn't know who any of these people were. I was like, okay, I guess I got to Google who the hell, Falcon is. And
Yeah. Look on the Wikipedia.
Right. So I wound up writing these episodes, and they were like, great, you want to do another one? Okay. And next thing you know, there it was. So that was
wow.
That was pretty cool.
So that I'm curious, the play about the band traveling across to Newfoundland. Can you what was that? Where did this come from? Tell me a little about that.
I have always been a player of like Irish music. I'm big into Irish folk and like rebel songs and such like that. I love that kind of music. I've been singing it all my life. And so Newfoundland is kind of like Canada's Ireland in a way. It's like Little Ireland. And in the way that Nova Scotia is a little bit like Little Scotland. Yeah. I guess it's literally the name, Nova Scotia. New Scotland. But,
we just clued into that right now, live.
But so I was sort of always really enamored with Newfie society as well. And I'd been there a number of times, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the people and the culture and the music especially. And like all the old sailing songs and the songs about the sea that always spoke to my heart. I always felt like I was an honorary Newfie, right? So one year we had this opportunity to do a show. We didn't know what to do it about, and we decided, well, what if we did like kind of like a Spinal Tap, a play that's kind of like Spinal Tap, where it's like a documentary about this band. And so the idea just developed. Well, what if they were this band from Newfoundland, and what if they had to go across the country? And of course, the big reveal was, what if they were going across the country? They hadn't played together in 5 years, and there was all these tensions between them. They broke up for a reason. We'll find out what that is in the show. And they're going across the country to Vancouver to play a wake for Kate, who was the founding member of the band. She was from Vancouver, but she moved to Newfoundland, and she started this band, and so we all have this thing. But through the entire show, there's this whole conversation about Kate and what she meant to them, and the fact that they're going across the country to play this wake for this beloved person, their founder. And the whole time, Ned was the character I played. He's always talking to this one band member, but no one else ever actually talks to this band member. And of course, at the very end, you realize that was Kate the whole time. The spirit of Kate was with him the entire time. The whole thing was about him needing to go across to say goodbye to her finally, to let her go, right?
Yeah.
So, and all of the songs were kind of thematically related to that. Like the main song was called "The Betsy May," which was a song about having this sailing ship that they have, this fishing boat that just they can't keep it afloat, kind of thing. So they have to finally let her go, just let her sink to the bottom. So the whole thing was about that.
Wow.
The whole play was about the idea that you have to accept, and move on, right?
That
So,
sounds amazing.
yeah, well, we did very well. Like I said, we got picked up by the Arts Club Theater in Vancouver, and we toured with it for a while, and we did all kinds of local shows and stuff. And yeah, it was cool. 4 years we ran that show, so I guess it was a success.
What was the music kind of written original for this play, and
Yeah,
what was that? I would love to hear that. Like, are you a musician? Do you also play?
That's a very strong word for what I do. But,
Okay. Do you attempt?
I do. I play the guitar, although, like I said, I'm a party guitarsman. I'm the guy with the guitar around the campfire.
Yeah.
But, we had all of our cast members were all musicians. They had to be because we were going to be a band.
Yeah.
We had this wonderful music coordinator, Allison Jenkins, who was just a musical genius, and she, as well as our director Don, they really coordinated the music. So I only wrote, I think, one song in the show. My thing was about the story. My thing was about writing the characters in the story. But I kind of left the music to them, and it turned out great. So we had all kinds of band rehearsals and stuff, and it turned out so well, as a matter of fact, that after the show was over, people would come up to us and say, "Hey, do you guys want to play at this event?" And we're like, "Okay." So we wound up playing all these paid gigs as the back kitchen. So it was just like Spinal Tap. We weren't really
That's amazing.
from this. And the best part is the newfies in the audience. They would come up to us and go, "Geez, by gum, I haven't heard any kind of music like that in a long time. Which part of the rock are you from?" And I would say, "Well, I'm from the Edmonton part of the rock." And they go, "Oh, geez, oh, you sure fooled me, you know." But they loved it. They were just over the moon that somebody was sort of celebrating their culture without mocking it, you know? So it was just wonderful. We had Newfoundlanders come up to us with tears in their eyes saying, "Oh, I haven't been home in like 10 years. This is the first time I've heard those old music and songs and such." And it was just awesome. It was just awesome.
Man, I love hearing stuff like that, and I especially love how it sounds like it was a real. We were talking before too, but the call we started was this collaborative, like that magic that can happen, and it's like that's what it sounds like. When you're working in the corporate gigs, that doesn't exist, but this is so raw, and you guys are all making this together at the same time. I love that, man. That's really cool. Do you ever miss those? Do you ever miss doing like theater and stuff like that?
I miss the music. I certainly miss playing music. I haven't played music in a long, long time. I had an idea, and I still might do this. I had an idea. There's a couple of Irish pubs down in downtown San Antonio where I live. And I had this idea of going in, and, they're all playing country music and stuff. But I wanted to go in and be like, "All right, here's the deal, see. You guys are playing garbage music, but I can play the real thing for you. So give me like an open mic for an hour on Wednesday nights, and we'll see if the people like it. And if they do, I'll come back and sing some more for you." And then become like this, totally play the role of this displaced Irishman who's playing all these rebel songs, right? I still might.
That'd be amazing. You should. I mean, have you ever thought about incorporating music into your? We can get into your live show that you're doing and talk a little bit about that with Me, Myself, and Die. Would you ever do something like that, or do you find that's a little too much?
That there are certain disciplines that I don't want to mix. Music is hugely important for the show, but I try and leave that to the professionals. Like I hired out a bunch of composers to do original music for my show.
Yeah.
I've got some music coming back from. I've got a guy in Poland right now who's just done fantastic work for me.
Nice.
So yeah, music is just it's so important. It's so powerful, right? It can really shape a scene. It can really tell the story in so many ways that words can't.
Yeah, I mean, I told this in one of my talks yesterday, but when we were starting on this new indie game, it was going to be a comic book, and I had a friend of mine who just recommended that. Well, he's actually Irish. This an Irish musician who lives in Liverpool with another friend, and they had heard about what we were doing with this Fast Vision, and they were really inspired by it. And so I showed him what me and my friend Rock were working on. It was going to be a comic at the time, and then they saw the characters in the world, this Bronze Age sci-fi thing, and they were like, "Can we like write music in this world?" And I was like, yeah, well, sure. And then that collaboration has led us to go, let's just make an indie game out of it. Let's marry all the writing, the art, and the music. And man, it's cool when that kind of stuff can happen. So my question to you, when you're looking for musicians for Me, Myself, and Die, obviously each season has a little bit of different tone and theme to it. What are you looking for? Is it kind of a conversation for a while, or do you hear musicians you like? What's that process like for you?
So I will be inspired by a piece of music that I hear from virtually any source. It could be a soundtrack to a movie or something, or it could be, for season 3, which was kind of the piratey season. There was I was watching Black Sails at the time, so I wanted the feel of that kind of driving. Main theme, but also at exactly the same time in a video game trailer, I had heard a song that they used by a band called the Devil's Motorcycle Gang or something like that, or Beat the Devil's Tattoo. That was the name of the song, Beat the Devil's Tattoo. And there was something about the quality of this music that I took those two pieces and I sent it to my guy and I said, give me a theme with these. And he did. And he sent it back to me and I went, oh my God, that's so awesome. Now, just in this middle section, maybe give a little more percussion here, blah, blah, blah. And I just give him a little, and then he gave me the thing. But typically what I'll do is I will send an inspiration file to my composer. I'll say, here's like 4 sections of different pieces of music that I want you to try and find the essence of and blend them together into a theme and see what you can do. And it's funny because I'll do that with multiple composers and they'll all come back with different versions.
Oh, interesting.
Cool. Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess, yeah, because you're probably planning the show a bit, and then you haven't shot anything at that point, probably at that. But right. Can you talk a little bit about the process of Me, Myself, and Die, and like, first of all, tell me a little bit about where the idea came from, and then like what the growth and how it's evolved over the last couple of years.
So Me, Myself, and Die started off as a joke. It started off as, haha, wouldn't it be funny if I did this thing? Me and Will Friedle, who was the voice of Star-Lord on Guardians with us, famous Hollywood actor guy, great guy. I love him like a brother. We wanted to do. We had a potential agreement with a very large RPG company that shall remain nameless, but they were interested in producing at that time something. This was in 2018. They were interested in sort of, getting on the Critical Role bandwagon, right? In terms of like, well, we should do something like that because look how popular this is getting. Little did anyone know how huge it would become.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I remember having lunch with Matt Mercer, like basically in the first week he was doing Critical Role, and
wow.
I just got to town, and I said, I heard you're GM. I'd love to play. I'd love to run a game with you. And he said, well, I'm kind of in the middle of this thing right now, but we'll talk when it's done.
When it's
there
done.
It was. I could have been in on the ground floor of that, and I missed it. Anyway.
So close. That's the one time your golden ticket didn't pay off.
That's exactly. Just missed that brass ring a little bit. But anyway, so the project that we were going to do didn't work because of scheduling, and it became very frustrating over the next year to try and make scheduling work. But of course, trying to wrangle a bunch of professional voice actors is like herding cats. Yeah. Good luck finding one spot where they can all get together. And so finally we realized this isn't going to work. But I thought, you know what? I don't need anybody. I can do this myself. I'm going to do a show where I play a role-playing game, but it's just me. I'm going to run myself through the game. I'm going to play all the characters. I'm going to be GM and player. And how I'm going to do it with a little tool that I've known about for many years called the Mythic GM Emulator. And that had been around for a long time, but I had used it in the past to help flesh out adventures or stuff, or use it as like an idea generator in the middle of a session I was running to go, well, I'm not exactly sure what this would be. So how the Oracle works is that basically you can ask it the same kind of questions you would ask a GM, right? So is the door locked? Well, you can determine that. How many orcs are in the room? You can determine that. What is the meaning of this strange writing on the wall? You can ask it that. And what it's going to do, it's going to respond with idea prompts that you then take and go, oh, that makes me think of this, and boom. So it's a way to improvise things on the fly, but it's structured and it's controlled based on the rules that Mythic gives you. So essentially what I was doing in the show was I was playing Savage Worlds, which is a role-playing game system, but I was using using Savage World structure to act for the mechanics of the game, and Mythic for the mechanics of the GM, essentially. And that's how it happened. And I had no idea if it was going to work. I said I bought these cameras from my buddy. And the other thing I knew I was going to do is I didn't want to be a talking head with a Roll20 screen. I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. I wanted to do it like a Hollywood production. So that meant 6 cameras to start. I'm up to like 11 now. But
whoa, 11! Oh, wow.
6 cameras, and I wouldn't do it live. I would fully produce it. I would have music and sound effects and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it would just be me playing this game. And so I did the first episode, and I went, oh, I think I got something here.
Nice.
And I showed it to some of my gamer friends, and they went, I think you got something there.
Yeah.
So I put it up on YouTube, and I said, let's see what this does.
Yeah. And
that's what it did. It took off. But the funny thing is, I thought I was doing something wholly unheard of and unique. Look at me playing by myself. And out of the woodwork come all of these solo role players.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of such a thing.
Yeah.
My first thought was, get some friends. What's the matter with you? But then when you hear all the reasons why these people play solo, there's a million reasons. A lot of them are, I live far away and I don't have a group, and or I don't have time because of this. So this is a thing, this solo role play. And because the pandemic hit 6 months after I started the show, suddenly solo role playing became the thing. So I was kind of propelled up that way. Oh my God, if you want to know how to solo role play, go watch Me, Myself, and Die. Yeah. So that I was really boosted by those negative world events, you know.
Everyone else didn't get a golden ticket. You got another one.
I got another one.
That's awesome, man. It is like, it's such a clever idea, and it's, I mean, it would feel a little, for me anyway, a little daunting, because you really have to keep that energy up. And I mean, you obviously have the personality for that. Do you find, are there times when you're doing it where it's like there's a real struggle to kind of get through the story, or is it pretty naturally flowing as you're in it? Because I mean, obviously we see the edited version.
Right.
What is the process when you sit down to record, and what don't we see?
So that's a very common question I get. Like, how much? Okay, but how much are you sitting there going, "Oh, what does this mean? What could this mean?" So that does happen occasionally, but it's rare, because most of the time I treat the story, I treat the game as I would exactly if I was running it at the table, which means that I have to keep the pace up. I have to come up with something now, and damn the torpedoes. It doesn't matter what it is. Make it work. Just go. Trust your instincts. When you hear those prompts, you know, whatever they are, angelic elephant. Okay,
right.
Well, what does that mean?
Right.
Grab it. Whatever comes into your head, go with it. That's correct within the context. Feels right within the context of what you're doing, and go. And so consequently, there's not a lot of times where I get stumped. It does happen. I would say once every 4 or 5 sessions, there'll be a moment where I go, what the hell does angelic elephant mean? What could that possibly mean? And I'll sit there for a minute and go, you know what, I got nothing. So I cut that out. I cut that out because the channel is a show as well as a game. But there's been a lot of people who've said to me, you should release those bits, maybe to patrons or something, so that people can see this is how it really works. And I'm very sympathetic to that idea, because one of the reasons that a lot of old school gamers don't like actual plays, especially anything edited, is that they feel like the reason why they're watching a YouTube show to learn the system is being cut out in favor of the pacing of the story. And that's absolutely true. In my case, 100%. All of that boring stuff is cut out for the pace of the story. Because I'm also, yes, I'm a gamer, but I am a storyteller. And when it comes to presenting a finished product for YouTube, it has to be something that is engaging. And I want it to be interesting to people who aren't gamers. I want the story to be compelling to people who don't necessarily know anything about the system. But anyway, there is something to be said about releasing those bits that really show the gears grinding and going, now what does this mean? Because I think that would probably be useful for people, if
Right.
nothing else, to let them know that, oh yeah, no, that's okay when I do that. That
Yeah.
you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, there was somebody who talked about the Trevor Devall effect, like the Matt Mercer effect, right? Like the Trevor Devall effect with solo gaming, that, oh, well, if you're not playing like Trevor, you're doing it
Yeah.
wrong. And that, nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Man. Nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very clear, like, you're doing entertainment, right? There are many different ways. Like, I feel like for me, I've played a few. Like, I played 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, which is it's just a writing exercise, right? Like, it's just
Right.
it's a way for you just to like get your pro skills up to snuff. So I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. Did you do improv a lot when you were doing theater? Was that something that you got into at all?
I had done it. I was never I wasn't super active in it. I did a bunch. I did various phases. Like I was with, I did the obligatory groundlings thing in LA and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I was never. Improvisation was never something I focused on as a practice in the theater because I was doing it all the time in the game.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So when you were a kid, who did you often play with? Like, who was your crew? Was it some school friends? Was it your siblings? Like, what was the vibe?
They're the guys I still play with to this day.
Really?
Yeah, my old group from high school.
Wow.
So my oldest friend in the world, who was also named Trevor, and he was my next door neighbor. We had two Trevors growing up side by side.
Yes.
We both discovered the game at exactly the same time. He's a year older than me, and he's in my group. He's in my gaming group still. Like
Wow.
all of this, we finally came to our absolute core group in high school, and those guys I still get together with on Zoom. They're all, well, most of them are still back in Edmonton, but we get together. We ran a 6-year One Ring campaign that I was running.
Wow.
It took 6 years, took 30 years in game time, but I ran it remotely from both Vancouver and LA, and I would fly up to Edmonton sometimes. Same group, exact same guys. So it's again, not a lot of people have the benefit of that. So I'm very grateful for that.
I can imagine. I often talk about, for instance, like when I'm working with rock, an artist that I did Rat Queens with, like there's like this unspoken, it's this language that exists in the fiction between us, Right. And it's such a powerful thing that you almost don't want to, like, why would I start working with somebody else, because we've established so much. I'm sure for you guys, it's like it must be intense.
Oh yeah.
How do you surprise them anymore?
Right, exactly. They know all my tricks.
Exactly. So where do you guys play now? That now you guys still get together. What are you guys playing?
Currently, we're in a Mithras game that my friend Ross is running. I introduced them to Mithras when it first came out under the guise of RuneQuest 6 a few years ago, and they fell in love with it. It's one of the most deeply tactical and simulationist kind of games out there, which that's a love of mine. I love that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I've noticed that.
It's not hugely popular at the moment. Everybody's into Rules Light, and Rules Light, while it has its place, bores me to tears after about 3 sessions. I'm like, all right, what else can you do? No, okay, yeah,
Just because you feel like it doesn't define it enough, like it doesn't. Because I think sometimes some of the rules they're too light that they don't. I think rules are best when they're really thematic, like they set you in a tone and a place, and
Right.
it tells a very specific story. I like that, but
Right. Rules have to be every rule. Like the game I'm writing for season 4, the every rule has to be in service to what the game is about.
Yes.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean that my game is like one of these one-trick ponies where, like that game Heart, where you play like, well, we're rebels going up the tower in order to overthrow the government, and that's all the game is ever about. That's not what mine is. Mine is a classic role-playing game. You can use it to do whatever you want. But that said, it's what we call a sim-light game. It's a simulation guide. So the focus of the game is on skill sets. It's on careful tactical choices, not just in combat, but also in social encounters,
Nice.
in exploration. All of these things, the player, again, player agency. Players have to have the skill set to be able to make meaningful choices that could determine the outcome of things based on the roll of the dice. So, yeah, those rules every rule has to be designed to further that idea that players have agency and that they can affect the world, but they got to work for it. Because every time you, my whole philosophy is every time you push on the world pushes back, and that's the game. That's the entire game. The players, we want this. We're going to try to achieve this, and the world says, really? Okay, well then, how about that? And the players go, well then we got to fix this, and the world says, oh yeah, how about this? That's the game. That's the whole game.
Interesting. Do you run this one? Like, have you run the world that you've been doing for Me, Myself, and Die with anyone outside of it, or
Not the world. We're doing play tests of the system,
and
and
how's that going?
really good. We have another one today, actually.
Oh,
In
wicked.
a couple hours.
Nice.
Really good. I am blessed to have some of the greatest gaming minds available to me down here in San Antonio. I just
wow.
fell again. Golden ticket. Fell
Golden
in with these guys. Perfect group. I run them in a Vampire 5 game right now, and they're
Yeah.
just the best players. But they're all super rules heads. So it's perfect for the playtest because I sit down and I can put very, very, not necessarily complicated, but I can put complex rules down in front of them and say, okay, break it. See where it doesn't work, and
Yeah.
they will. They'll find
Yeah.
a way, but they'll also have a way to fix it, right? They'll be like, I think I know where you went wrong. This happened if you just change this, and I go, of course, obviously. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I've been doing the same with my group where I at the end, because usually my game is a little bit more kind of like the what's the not Blades, well, Blades in the Dark a bit, where you kind of mark XP at the end, and I'm noticing like, man, we're not getting as much XP, and so we sit there and go like, what did you guys do this session that you feel like you should have earned XP? And then we sit around and we talk about it, and that's cool. Like, that's a cool way of getting different minds on it, and
Yeah, it's funny you say that because that is the XP system in my game. So my game is a very what they would call a crunchy game.
Yeah.
But the only way to earn experience points is to further your character's goals. That's it.
Oh, interesting.
At the end of the session, you sit down and the whole table goes, okay, what is it? What are your objectives? And you have a list of objectives, things you want, and you look at it. Did you take any meaningful steps towards that
I like
objective?
that.
Did you have to overcome an obstacle by rolling dice in order to further that? It doesn't matter what the goal is, as long as it's important to the character. And if they did, they earn XP.
It's
And
that
if
simple.
It's that simple.
That's
Pursue
interesting.
your objectives. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, but that's any story. The characters pursuing their goals. Why do we overcomplicate that so much?
Exactly. But most people don't know, and a lot of gamers, and I would hesitate, or I would venture to say most inexperienced GMs especially, don't understand that when you are running a role-playing game, you're not telling a story, you're not writing a script, but you are providing the building blocks for drama. And like in any drama, you must have two things. You must have a character that wants to achieve something, and you must have an obstacle in their way.
Yeah.
That's it. Once you have that, you've got drama. That's
Yeah.
the reason why some of the best advice is, if you don't know how to start the game, start them in the middle of a fight. In
Right.
media res. Boom. So now they have to make a choice and take action.
Yeah.
Go. That's how I started the first season of Me, Myself, and Die. I
Right.
had no idea what was going to go on, so let's start in the middle of Simon's trying to rescue his friend.
Didn't go well. Didn't go well.
Didn't go well. But that spun off into a whole campaign.
I love though that it's like you're like 10 minutes into the game, you're like, did I just end the game before I've even got anywhere? What would you have done in that situation? Would you have just started like episode 2, like, this is a new character? Have you thought about that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
Like people
yeah.
say to me, so okay, in episode or in season 3, Edbert's on this massive journey. Well, what if he gets killed in a random fight halfway through?
Yeah.
Well, just like George R. R. Martin has taught us, if your main character dies, there's a whole world of
Yeah.
characters populating that setting
Right.
that can step in and take over, right?
Yeah.
So when it's done well, like Ned Stark, the first time we read this in the first book, where Ned Stark, you can't believe it. You're like, but Ned's like really the main character. He
Yeah.
can't possibly be dead.
Yeah.
And then you realize not only is he dead, there's a whole other cast going to step in
Yeah.
and care, because the world keeps going. And you go, right. It's not about my special hero character is going to save the world. And maybe it is. Maybe it turns out that way.
Yeah.
But there's no goddamn guarantees. Come on.
Yeah.
Man.
What kind of is, obviously your Me, Myself, and Die has kind of like a lighthearted adventure. There's some darker themes in there and stuff like that. But like, what is a storyteller? What kind of stories, if it's you and your buddies, like, what do you like to do? Like, what kind of tone? What do you get into, like emotional stuff, or do you kind of stay away from that for your role play? Okay.
Well, it depends on the game. Like if I'm running in our vampire game, for example, it can be very, very heavy because there's some very dark stuff that comes up. As you can imagine, you're playing bloodthirsty monsters. But in our One Ring game, there was moments where my players were reduced to tears because of what had happened with some of the NPCs. that they had come to know over years and years and years and years and years. And there was moments where these big, strong, manly men were like weeping,
Wow.
shedding a tear at this moment that we had sort of created in the game. So we left every One Ring game exhausted, all of us.
Wow.
Me as a GM, I had to go lie down. The players were just like, oh my God. But they loved it because it was so powerful. It was so meaningful to them, right? So, but if we're playing, I don't know, DCC classics, right? Like go in the dungeon and kill some stuff, and oh no, you lost another character, ha 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 ha.
Right.
Then, yeah, obviously, then that's the focus of that.
Yeah.
But it depends on the game.
Yeah. What do they like? Do they prefer any one or the other? They just kind of go with like, do they like the cathartic stuff? Like I love that that's where I like to go with my games.
Yeah, we tend to, when I run games, I've been accused by all my players, like, oh my God, you're a hard goddamn GM. Oh my God, your games are so hard. Because I want the players to work for it. I want the players to have to be faced with very difficult decisions. Now, that doesn't mean that every time they turn around, they're faced with a difficult decision. That would be too exhausting. You got to give them moments of levity. You got to know when to let the scene breathe. You got to let them know when to enjoy their successes, right? To taste the fruits of their labors. But by and large, yeah, I run very immersive, intense, challenging games most of the time.
Yeah.
And the players that played with me, well, they keep coming back to the table, so I guess they like it.
Were those guys that played in your Blade Runner game? Were they part of your crew, or are those your San Antonio?
Those are my locals, yeah, San Antonio folks.
Where did that come from? Like I know because you're doing Me, Myself, and Die. It's you. And then what prompted you to do that show? Because you said it was a lot of work and it was the most difficult one. Like what was the impetus behind that?
So Free League always sends me their stuff, which is fantastic because I think they're one of the greatest companies out there right now. I just love them.
Dude, they're amazing.
I've got an open line to Tomas, one of the head honchos over there. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
They're just a fantastic company. And to the point where like this is scary. Did they sign a deal with the devil? Because how do they keep producing incredibly consistent quality games?
Yeah.
Like every 2 months there's some new awesome thing they're doing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But they had sent me the Blade. I had no interest in running the Blade game at all. And then they sent me the game and they sent me the starter set. And the props in that game were things of such beauty. I was like, oh my God, this is like props out of the movie. And I was like, well, I have to shoot this now. I have to shoot this now. So I wrote Tomas and I said, I want to do this thing. And he's like, yeah, for sure. You can do whatever. That's good. Yeah, we will support you. It'll be good. So he doesn't actually sound like that.
He probably does a little bit.
So I did. And I told my guys, I said, well, I need you to do this thing for me. It's going to be a long day. It's going to be a 12-hour shoot day. We're going to shoot the whole thing, which is fine. We all love that, right? The longer the game, that's an adventure. It's great. But then the editing, the post-production, it took me 2 months to cut that up into 8 episodes.
Wow.
And do and again, it's just me, man. I don't have an editor or a DP or a writer or special effects people. I have friends that step in to help me with stuff I can't, like with the animations. I've got a buddy who's like dabbling in AI animations and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, give me a Blade Runner car flying through the city. Oh, okay, great. Okay, we'll put that in. But all the post-production, I mean, I do myself. My friend James Arnold Taylor, he helped me with like some of the mixing of the audio and stuff because he's a whiz at that. But in terms of like everything else, it was all me all day long assembling these edits.
This whole thing must have been an incredible learning experience. Like, I mean, you work in film, and so you had that background already, but then going into it, I'm sure you learned an incredible amount.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. I think it's the best thing I've ever done on the channel, and it's also one of the least viewed things.
It's frustrating.
It is frustrating. People don't know it. They don't watch it, and I think people think, oh well, it's another actual play. It's going to be a bunch of guys sitting around the table unedited. And I'm like, no, this is like a TV show.
Yeah.
This is fully produced. It is cut. It is edited. It is scored. There's effects. This is like a show, man.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not your daddy's AP. You know what I mean?
Is that why you think it didn't do well? Because people made that assumption. It was like, it's just going to be another one of those things, which is weird because people have seen what you've been doing That
Yeah,
wouldn't be my first thought, you know?
that's a mystery to me.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. I think the other possibility is that there's a lot of people out there who look at me as the solo guy. So if they see other people in my videos, they go, they just dismiss it. Or maybe
Yeah.
the algorithm doesn't feed it to them for whatever reason. I don't know. But all I know is that I have to keep doing what gives me passion and what I'm excited about. Otherwise, I can't do something just to feed an algorithm. Otherwise, I'll blow my brains out. Like it's not. No, I have to. I always have to produce something that I'm going to be in love with, regardless whether people are watching.
This is kind of something that me and my friends, creatives, were talking about. Is there's something to just authenticity that I don't know if it's just a thing of this age, but you draw the right people to you when you're, even if it's like, you know, even this project we're working on, it's like we've pitched to a few people and they're like, you know, like it doesn't connect. But then we have a meeting with other people. We just sit down. Hey, this is what we're doing. But they get that it's from our heart and that this is really us, and and they get it. And then those people just come closer. And I feel like that's all what you're doing with your channel is like, that's authentically you. And it's so glad that you're doing your own thing with your own space, because it's just, I think it's nice to have the passion bleeds through, you know, and I think that's why a lot of people really connect with what you're doing. And and you draw the right people to you as well. It's incredible that you do it all by yourself, man. I can't even imagine. What is season 4? I mean, how long do you think that's going to take you from when you start? I mean, you probably already started shooting, but how much time investment is that for you? Is it like a year or how long?
Well, it depends. I'm intentionally keeping season 4 shorter, which I normally never do. I just normally let things go. But I have a couple of reasons for doing that. But I'm trying to keep the season to be around 10 to 12 episodes as opposed to like 20.
Yeah.
So an episode takes me from the time I sit down to the time I'm putting it up on YouTube, probably 48 hours in total. So, and that's like 48
actual 48
hours of work. Yeah. So the better part of, you know, I'd say I go into shoot, and then I take the footage and I go into the editing room, and I don't emerge for 3 days, basically.
Wow.
And I do everything. I do the rough cut, and then I do the effects pass, and I do the titles, and then I do the music, and I do the sound effects and all that kind of stuff, and then I have to test it, and I have to watch, and then I upload it, and I test that to make sure there's no glitches in the upload. So about 48 hours per episode, which I'm happy to do, because it always becomes something magic in the creation of it, right? Like a lot of filmmakers will say a very true statement, which is that a film is made 3 times, right? It's written, and then it's shot, and then it's edited. And there's 3 different films that get made every single time. Yeah. Because that's the nature of the beast. And it's kind of similar with mine. I sit down, I have no idea what's going to happen in a session. I have no idea. I just know where I'm starting, right?
Yeah, that's fun.
And so then after I'm done, I shoot it, and I realize I've come to a natural end point. I sense, this is a good place to end it, and you'll have to tune in next time to find out what happens to me. And then, okay, take this, and I throw it into the edit bay, and I go, okay, let's cut out all the junk, cut out all the dead parts of the 5-minute sections where I have to get up from the table and grab the right minis and put them on the table and stuff that. Cut out all the dead air, and then assemble the edit in such a way as to make it pleasing, and clean it up and yada yada yada, and then it emerges into something really cool. And by the time I put the music to it, I'm just like, oh, this is so good.
Have you ever had moments? I mean, I really feel like, I think the end of season 2, I had a genuine emotional feeling to a lot of the storylines there. I've noticed maybe sometimes you've almost cracked. Has there been times where it's very in the moment where it's hard to hold it?
Oh yeah, I think the endings of all 3 seasons have been that moment.
Yeah.
The moment, there's an interesting theme that has run through each season, and that theme is redemption. Redemption arc.
Yeah. It's great.
And I didn't do that on purpose. That's just sort of, but I've always been attracted to the redemption arc story.
Same.
Like the story of Darth Vader. I'm talking the original 3 movies.
Right.
That's all I'm talking about. That redemption arc of him redeeming himself at the end and saving his son and saving himself by doing it. That, even as a kid, that brought a tear to my eye. I was just like, that is so powerful to me. Yeah. And I think it bleeds through in everything I do. My play, The Back Kitchen, which I talked about, is basically a redemption arc, right? Yeah. Simon's story in season 1. it's a redemption arc. Arn's story is about him trying to redeem the fact that he failed
Yeah.
his family before. And in a way, Edbert's story there's many redemption arcs in season 3, but so I think that's a common thing. And I can tell already that in season 4, I haven't started to shoot it, but I'm in planning for it. I can tell already that redemption arc is going to be back. It's going to be another aspect of it.
Nice. No,
Take
I
it
mean,
away from it.
I love those kinds of. I think it's why your show resonates with me too, and I think people all do. I feel like maybe we also live in a bit of a time where people don't. We don't want to hear about redemption anymore. It's like, well, that person's just gone now. But like, I think we all really do love that catharsis, and maybe that's why there's that nice emotional resonance with your show as well, which is really beautiful. We have a question for you. Here we go. Let's see. Hey Trevor, what do you see as the future of solo tabletop role-playing games that are designed especially for solo play? Games like Ironsworn. Do you think this type of game will remain a niche thing a few years from now?
No, I think it's become even more popular than it was a few years ago when I found it, and I think it's just going to grow in popularity as the technology evolves to put people more into the space of the world. So, with the new VR headsets and all that stuff that's coming out, very soon we're going to have a situation where you can say, I'm going to enter the world of Ironsworn, I'm going to put on my thing, and I'm going to have an adventure by actually seeing it and participating in it. Now, I don't think that's a good thing, because I think the power of role-playing games is the power of your own imagination. And if you're being told what to see, if you're being shown, that's not the same thing. That's atrophying your own imagination.
I agree, man.
Yeah. So do I think it's going to continue in popularity? I do. I think it's going to become much bigger than it is now, but it's going to take on a very different form, and I think a less valuable form.
It's interesting. I've really recognized that, especially now that I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I really recognize that even TV and movies, everything's being done, but then when we do a tabletop game together, or she's making her own stories, her own comic books, it's like that's all out of her. That has to come out of her. It's not being done for her, and I think that's a really interesting insight, man. I like solo table. I mean, I had never done one until I saw your show. I think it's such an interesting. It's a writing exercise for me, and it's an interesting way of exploring characters. And man, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up for season 4, man. When do we get to see that thing, man? Have you announced the release date yet? You're killing
Sort of. It was supposed to be like now, but we've been set back with a few technical issues. But right now, I'm hoping to shoot the first episode, fingers crossed, in about 2 weeks, which means that within 2 to 3 weeks, the first episode should be out. And then I'm hoping to do a production schedule of once every 2 weeks. It might be more. It probably won't be less. I never like to keep things less. I don't want too much time to go in between episodes. For the same reason when I'm running a game, I don't want there to be too much time in between sessions. I'm a real fascist when it comes to running my games. I'm like, we do it every week. We will play every week, every single week, or else you're out. Right?
You must be excited to get sitting down and playing this game again.
I am, and I'm really excited to because it's a whole new setting. It's a whole new setting I've never done on the show. So all kinds of new minis and new sets and new everything, but also new system. The fact I'm doing my own system is both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And it's going to be cool to see it evolve a little bit as you're playing, because I'm sure there is going to be little things you learn along the way. We have one more request, because we're done here already. That went really quickly. Oh, wow. This is from my wife, actually. I guess she's missing home. She wants to hear the Newfie accent again.
Oh, is she from there?
No,
oh, wow.
Nope, she's not, but she wants to hear it.
So when I was doing the show, I would teach my castmates the accent, because a lot of them would slip into Irish, right? Is Irish, and that is not at all the same thing. This Irish thing, that's a very lilty sort of, almost like a West Country Tipperary sort of accent, and that is not the Newfie. The Newfie accent, right? She's really hard and nasal like that, you know what I mean? So the phrase that I gave my cast to say in order to get them in the accent was, she'll be coming down round the mountain. What the hell was it? She'll be coming round the mountain, down the other side through the bar. Which turned into, she'll be coming down round the mountain through the other side through the bar. Like that. And as soon as she'll be coming down round the mountain through the other side through the bar, like that. And look at that there, right? We're on the rack, just like that. You know what I mean?
So good, man. It's like, it is funny, like what you said about how, the Newfies, like, we make fun of, but it's the greatest. It's like, it's one of my favorite things about I love it. I love that. I love the culture out there.
Me too.
Yeah, it's I don't know, we made fun of them. They're just a little bit different, that's all.
I love them. I think they're the best of us.
I mean, before we go, where did that connection come from? Like, why did you spend time there, or you just, like, how did that happen?
Not as a kid. My mother's side, if you go back, well, not that far, but if you go back far enough, is Irish. So I always had that kinship with that culture, even though I didn't have any direct contacts with it. But
Yeah.
I grew up with there was something that always drew me to that culture, that music, that history, all
Music,
of it.
yeah.
Yeah, and the music especially. Like when I went to Ireland, we were in the west at a little place called Dingle, which is this little town on the west coast, which is where all the musicians go. Like Bono will show up there to play in a pub. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It's like,
Yeah.
and I got a chance to sing in the pub.
Oh,
It was
wow.
it was a magical night where there was these two guys. They were playing these old songs, and they were all like, there was a bunch of Americans at the bar, so we were playing like Danny Boy and shit. And I went up and I said, why don't you play like Black and Tans? They're like, oh no, we can't play that rebel music here. I said, but if you want to sing it, you come up here now. I said, okay. So I got up and and the fucking place went nuts. They were
Wow.
loving it, and I was singing songs, and I introduced them to a bunch of Stan Rogers music from the East Coast of Canada, and they were
Man.
loving that, and it was just magic.
That's amazing. I love that. Perfect way to end it. All right, dude. Thank you so much, man. Check out Me, Myself, and Die. Season 4 is coming out, which I'm really excited about. You can go to his YouTube channel. Man, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you're up to this year. It's going to be awesome.
Thanks.